What's worthwhile? Healing mind, body, and spirit. I'm Ramsey Zimmerman. I choose peace of mind, vitality of body, and joy of spirit over stress, exhaustion, or overwhelm. Together, let's explore and pursue the many ways to build holistic health and wellness.
Part of what brought me to studying nutritional therapy because, I'm living outdoors and I'm just really aware that, I really need to pay attention to what's going into my body. The nature blueprint is that it will regulate your nervous system. It will bring us into presence. We are all part of this. And we've got, we live in this rhythm. We're living in this rhythm of day and night and moon and tide and seasons. What's the next step here? When we get away from technology and noise, the emotional patterns that we have, then you can be informed to make a different decision. What can I do instead?
Hey there, it's Ramsey here. That was Rita Naomi Moran. We've gotten to be good friends since I interviewed her the first time on What's Worthwhile a few months back. One of the many things that she's into is the healing power of nature. Being outdoors, participating in natural cycles of day and night, breathing clean, fresh air, and digging your toes into the earth. This conversation really explores the many ways that nature resets our minds, bodies, and spirits. So what are you waiting for? Download this podcast, listen to it on your way out to a trailhead, and then unplug and enjoy the sights, sounds, and smells. But let's chat a bit first, shall we? Hey Rita, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm so happy to be here talking with you today.
Yeah, well, thanks for making a return visit to the What's Worthwhile podcast, and I'm glad that I caught you when I did because it sounds like you are headed off on another adventure. Where are you going this time?
Well, I'm honored to be here, Ramsey. Thank you for asking me. We are headed toward the Pacific, towards your coast,
Nice.
from the Washington, D.C. area. And our goal is Pinnacles National Park. It's a tiny national park. But yeah, that's our goal. It's about 2.5 hours east of San Francisco or 2 hours east of San Jose, California.
Cool.
But yeah, I'm just excited to get out of here.
Well, this is not your first rodeo. In fact, you have more than 200. I don't know how many rodeos you have, because you wrote a book back in 2022, Go Outside, and at that point you'd visited over 200 national parks. But where are you at now that we're here in 2025?
Yeah. Well, we're, I think, 302 or maybe 303. There are 433 total national park units that are run by the National Park Service. And that includes national parks, national monuments, national trails, national historic sites or parks. I think there are 22 designations. But so we've been to 302 or so of those sites, and then there are 63 national park units that have the national park name in it. So we've been to 61 of the 63 of the major national parks.
Wow. So you've broken 300 now. And what just keeps you heading outdoors?
Oh, well, there's so many reasons. I think for us initially, this started as an adventure with my son, who was 7 at the time, and it was a means of connection. Our family was struggling with a few issues, and it was an instinct mostly that got me started. And then as it progressed, this was in 2016, and it was the change in his health and in my health, and eventually for my husband as well. It was so significant. I realized that, there's something really happening here when we're outdoors, when we spend this much time outdoors. So part of what keeps us going is just the restoration that we experience when we're there, the sense of adventure, and really the connection. It really deepens our family bond.
So, in what ways do you find nature healing? Because you and I are both, we're in this, nutritional therapy program, but, we're both really interested in bigger sort of pictures of mind, body, spirit healing. And I'd love to talk for, the time that we have together today about why and how nature is so important to our health and improving our health. And it sounds like you and your family have lots of personal experience with that. So, like, where do you want to start? What do you find healing about nature?
Well, I think it would be great to start with what brought us initially together, which is through our study through the nutritional therapy program. And in that program, the program itself is based on several pillars of healing. And one significant pillar is stress and how to help people reduce stress in their lives because it has such a vital impact on not just our mental state, but our ability to live well, or survive even. And so I suppose my lens is there, within this idea of how can I help somebody, myself as well, reduce stress. And that kind of is the underlying connection. But there's also another part of this, which is I think we've talked quite a bit about, what is it what matters? What drove us into traveling the national parks was a sense of our value system. Are we living authentically? Are we living in a way that we need to be living, and does that way that we're living match with what our nervous system is asking from us? And being in nature, for instance, it helps to regulate your nervous system. It lowers cortisol, it lowers blood pressure. Even just 20 minutes in nature just helps to lower the stress response. So, and I mean, of course, I have this whole list of things I can tell you about what nature does.
Yeah, no. Let's start with stress, because stress is just such a factor of everyday life. It seems like for people, but it's also really complicated. And how do you address it? How do you get rid of it? I've been thinking about that a lot lately too. And yeah, there's all of these stress responses from cortisol and other hormones. It sort of spins us up. And then in our lives today, it seems like we're just not able to spin it back down as easily. But what do you think about, what is it that you think about nature that helps us to spin that stress down or to address it directly, perhaps? What's been your experience?
Well, and while you were saying that, I was remembering a teacher who said to me once when I was asking about, I was in this phase of my life where I found meditation and prayer just really almost painful. It was hard for me to sit still. My mind was racing and I was very stressed. And they said to me, well, you wouldn't expect yourself to pray in a disco. So maybe have a little more compassion for yourself about, and I realized, oh yeah, living in the city, living in this lifestyle of, constantly going, even the way parents are around here, where we're trying to get our child into a good college, or even just, getting them through high school and, that kind of thing. it's just this relentless rat race. And when you start to shift your focus to nature in some way, whether it's the tides, the seasons, just the sun rising, even getting first light every day, it makes a huge change in not only your mindset but in your physiology. So for me, at first, it's just, and how I'm feeling today. Um, I need to get out of the disco, and I need to get into nature. It's. In fact, I was going to say also that before I came on the podcast, I was sitting here and doing some yogic breathing, and at one point, I was kind of laughing at myself because I thought, yeah, it's interesting doing deep breathing in my house in the city versus outdoors. And the environment is so supportive of this breathing practice. And at a certain point, our bodies succumb to that extra stimulation and we need to get out of it. We need periodic breaks. At least I do, but I think most people do.
Yeah. Yeah, that analogy of praying in the disco or even just trying to concentrate or do anything other than dance when there's just loud music and swirling lights and all that stuff coming at you from all sides.
Right.
I think that's a really great point. Being able to connect through and to your environment. The other thing I was thinking of when you said that about meditating or breathing or mindfulness or meditation and being painful, the other thing that came to mind for me is that those things, I associate them with turning inward, turning inside, looking through and at and with our mind's eye, versus when you're outside, outdoors, looking at beautiful vistas, you're turning yourself outwards. You're looking outwards and at nature where, is outside of yourself. And I think it's two different ways of thinking about or saying the same thing, which is that, turning inward, imagining is great. That's one thing. But then if you're actually in the real place where you can actually see it, where you're actually experiencing it, that's something that's a level beyond. So what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, so now that to me is actually the paradox of nature. I mean, it's the paradox of being alive, because if we spend too much time sinking into awareness, we can sometimes get lost, and then there's self-absorption with that. And so we can lose our way. But we can lose our way in both directions. We can lose our way by becoming so outwardly focused in succeeding, the next best job, more money, all of it. And so there is some type of balance that's needed no matter where you are. And I think to me, when I'm in nature, there's a type of realness to it. You can't really run from hail and wind and fire and ocean waves. You have to meet it. You have to look at it. You have to deal with it. You need to take care of yourself in the best possible way, or to survive.
Yes, it's real. It's right in your face. It's direct.
And it invites embodiment, right? If we're in our everyday kind of life trying to get the next best thing, that's not really embodying. It's putting us into a material mindset that ultimately we're not going to take with us, So there's this kind of sensibility when you're outdoors that is inviting truth internally. So I don't know, it's a dance, going back to your original idea that I mean, don't you think? It seems to me that because we need awareness to heal.
Well, you mentioned materiality, and being out in nature. It seems to me is extremely material. Like it, the wind is hitting your face, the water is hitting your face. You're hearing the things that are literally around you, and all of that, like you were saying, needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed directly, as opposed to the things that we deal with on a virtual basis, and interacting through screens or microphones or speakers. That is nice, and I enjoy speaking with you. But it's, in the sense, it's not real. It's not direct. It's not, we're not breathing the same air. But then when you get outdoors, it is extremely material. It's extremely real.
Mm. Well, I just want to say, as a point of clarification, I think that when I was saying material, I was referring to the trappings of wealth and the trappings
Ah,
of capitalistic type of ideas. Not that all capitalism is bad. I just mean how we lose ourselves in that type of materialism.
yes.
The material world itself isn't inherently bad. That's not what I mean. I just mean that when we lose our connection to what is real, and I suppose when I say realness, I mean the connection to something that our humanity, our personal humanity, our humanity in terms of connection with each other, our families, and then other people, and I just think that like our original thought when we thought we'd come together was just this idea of what is healing, what about nature is healing,
Yeah.
and to me, it's it heals that disconnect that I think that we're all experiencing right now with technology, um, and also, we've talked about this before. It also helps to our physiology is wired to fight or flight, to run from a saber-toothed tiger, but we're living without those saber-toothed tigers. So we kind of have this hyper responsiveness to stress. And I think nature takes that edge off.
Yeah. Um, Nature, how does nature take that edge off of stress, do you think, from a physiological standpoint?
Well, I mean, several ways. I mean, if you were just to look at the fight or flight system, which is uh, the sympathetic system, which helps us to take action. Being outdoors actually stimulates the parasympathetic system, so it helps to bring us out of that fight or flight place and help to regulate our blood pressure. Is that what you mean? Like,
Yeah. And I think it does that in a variety of ways, right? Because we have fresh air, we have beautiful things to look at, we have the sounds of birds and the rustling of leaves, and just all of the senses and sensations.
right, right, yeah. Senses are. It's a very interesting thing because when we start to tune into our senses and our proprioceptive awareness, we can disconnect or detach at least from the stories we might tell ourselves about, either why something's happening the way it is, or, maybe we're upset at somebody for different reasons. But it'll help us connect with the senses of the body. And that's infinitely more truthful than the story we usually tell ourselves around the sensation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it seems like we're always creating virtual versions, or facsimiles, or um, you know, chemicals that smell like something, as opposed to the actual thing that smells like itself.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And it's interesting because kids these days, they don't really know where their food comes from. They don't know what it takes to grow a plant, and the animals that depend on that system, and the farmers, and the whole process of that. That's part of nature, what we ingest, how we ingest it, when we ingest it, because there's a rhythm. I mean, that's all nature, right? Don't you
Yeah,
think?
and there's you know, some uh, creation of foods that weren't ever grown plants.
It's
That
scary.
are being manufactured in laboratories, and even proteins that resemble meats being grown in
Yeah.
labs, and people are celebrating that as such a great innovation. And I don't know, man, I just find that kind of terrifying.
Right, and then also the engineering around taste buds. That the food is being manufactured for people's taste buds to, in a way, we're kind of bludgeoning our sense of taste, which is our earliest primal connection to life. We think about taste buds, and when a baby is born, they have, and I actually can't remember, but it's something like most of the taste buds they have are bitter and umami, which is breast milk. And so they're already hardwired with their taste buds to survive. But if we give them all these foods that are hyper sweet and hyper salty, they don't get to develop the full range of their humanity within their. I mean, I know that sounds strange to say, but being able to fully develop one's taste and one's senses, it should be a basic human right and not be controlled um, in the way that it looks like it's starting to go down.
Well, and it's this idea of more is always better. So in terms of taste, more salty, more sweet, more lemony, and all of that is just added and piled together. And they're in an arms race of seasoning sprinkles on processed foods to see which can taste the most. And then you're eating your hot Cheetos or whatever, and you can never go back to eating carrots and celeries.
Life
Oh.
takes on kind of dullness, I guess, for a certain amount. But then you can wean yourself off that stuff too. So it's just. I remember once we were camping with a family out in Washington. Actually, it was near you. It was near Vancouver. It was in Mount Rainier
Yeah.
National Park, and we were on the east side of the park. And there was a family there from somewhere in that area, and she was so we our children bonded, and it was great. And at one point, she was so excited to show me all the foods that she got from her food stamp allocation, that it was high in everything was high in it was all processed food, potato chips, ketchup, hot dogs, and where she had to shop was a food desert. There was absolutely uh, there were no fresh vegetables, no fresh food, but she was so grateful to have been able to get the food that she had, and they had saved. They both worked two jobs, and they had 3 kids, and camping was what they could afford, and they had such a good week. We had such a great week, all of us together. But I sat down with her, and I remember, encouraging her to try more green in her diet, especially for the kids, because no one had ever told her. No one had ever. She just thought that because she could get it with her, what she was allocated, that was okay. She was at least feeding our kids, and they were getting enough food, but they were also all obese, if that makes sense. They were bloated, and she said she didn't feel well, and so it was an interesting conversation, and we had many conversations around how she could try to maybe have canned vegetables instead, because that was what I can't remember the name of those. You see them in the rural areas. It's not a Dollar General, but something like that. That was all. That was, they had to drive.
Yeah, whatever store they had available.
Yeah, exactly. So it just has implications, this disconnect. I think it's a real issue for those of us who live in this country, that it's part of what brought me to studying nutritional therapy, because, I'm living outdoors, and I'm just really aware that, okay, I really need to pay attention to what's going into my body. The nature blueprint is that it will regulate your nervous system. It will bring us into presence. We are all part of this, and we've got, we live in this rhythm. We're living in this rhythm of day and night and moon and tide and seasons. What's the next step here? So
yeah,
I don't know how much time you spend outdoors, but I wonder if what your experience is with all this.
Yeah, I spend some significant time outdoors. I also spend a lot of time indoors. But what I always sort of see and understand and think is that outdoors and in nature is what is actually real. And it's sort of the basis and foundation. And that we, as people, we try to, create better things, or we try to create a better system. And it just seems like the better system the system that we create is never really better. It's just an imitation. I saw, I'm a fan of silly t-shirts. And one of my favorite silly t-shirts, which I haven't purchased yet, but maybe I need to get one, has a picture of a hiker, and it says, in like video game letters, it says, get outdoors. The graphics are awesome.
That's actually really funny.
Yeah, it's like
I love it.
And it gets to that point of with all of our technology, we keep trying to reproduce something that we can literally just get through the window. Mm-hmm. But then, I live here in Washington State, so I'm spoiled because I've got mountains and ocean and rivers and prairies and all that kind of stuff, right outdoors, right outside my house, right down the trail. So got to be mindful of that. Not everybody can have that all the time, but national parks are certainly available to get to through a visit, as you have done and continue to do.
You've got some great ones near you. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, Mount Rainier, that sort of is right in my vista as I look out in a certain direction, not from my house, but it's fun because there's certain points around the town where that if you head up a certain hill, you'll see it off in the distance if the mountain is out. which is what we say,
Oh,
because
right.
it's either cloudy or it's not cloudy. And if it's not cloudy, then the mountain is out. Um, I'm pretty
Right.
sure the mountain's always there. It's like we
Right.
just can't
Totally.
see it.
Yeah, there's a beautiful lesson in there. Right there. I love that.
Yeah. Talk to me a bit about the idea of grounding. I'm pretty interested in grounding, and that's either, sometimes people use that in sort of a metaphorical stance, and sometimes people use it in like a physical stance. But do you think much about grounding?
I do a lot. I think working as a healer, and being an empath, and being empathetic, I think what what I've needed assistance with in my life is when I'm working with someone to remember where I begin and where the other person ends. There's what that boundary is. I mean, obviously, physically, we know because we have skin and we have our personal container. But I think that when you're working a lot with helping someone, that we sometimes merge a little bit. If you believe in energy fields, and or healing energy, that there's going to be some mix. I like to think of it as, we're 2/3 more than that made of water, and anytime something touches against that water will absorb it. You know, and so
Yeah.
grounding for me, yeah, you know what I mean. Um, Grounding is really important because I find that if I go outdoors and I put my bare feet on the ground, it's a way of purifying the water inside of me so that I can not only do I let it go, but then I can also start to remember. So for me, it's not just a grounding is a way to maybe let go of kind of the off gassing that happens from helping someone, but it also is a way to remember, remember who I am, remember, okay, this is my mission, I guess. I don't know how else to say it, but also this is my place in the world. So I suppose I look at grounding as physiological and energetic. I don't think you need to believe in the energetic to understand that physiologically it can actually really help you, lower heart rate and um, blood pressure and that kind of stuff.
Why do you think it helps you to remember? Like, why or how does that work together? I've heard a lot of people say a lot of things about grounding, but it's such a beautiful sentiment that the act of grounding helps you to remember. What is it about grounding that helps you remember?
I like to think of myself as the embodiment of the hopes and dreams of my ancestors. And so when I
Ah,
touch my feet to the earth, that is the remembrance that my being here has only happened because of the many lives before me. So that is the remembrance, but also the hope that I am the hope of that.
so it's like a timeless connection or reconnection because you're connecting to those gone by in the past, and you're also connecting to the hopes that they have for the future.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, but it's interesting because the word I was thinking was expression.
Hmm.
It's remembering that my expression in the world is a sacred place, and I need to remember to honor that. And touching the earth somehow helps me to remember that part. And I think that kind of touches in earlier on our earlier conversation around the material world and the sacred, if that's making sense. And grounding just kind of helps me remember that boundary, that it's not just, we're not just trying to drive forward towards something. We also need to remember that we are a vessel in some way. I like to think that those of us who've been given a gift to understand that we are more than just our body have also a responsibility to remember to stay connected. That is that
And the everything outside is alive. You have plants all around, you have animals, you have things in the air. Even the soil is alive, all the way down to the micro level, both in the water and in the soil.
the
It's just
bacteria. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's so much life, especially out in a place like a natural park where we haven't developed it with our own sort of building and construction and control that humanity places on an environment.
Yeah.
So do you think that life force, when you're grounding yourself, are you connecting into that natural life force?
Yeah, I feel that way. Again, it's a little bit like that disco story. It's like the disco is removed and all that bombardment of whatever's happening in this world that we're looking at is removed, and I can see what is most important for me. And for me, that means human beings and connections and helping people. Um, there was one more thought I had around that. Oh, just related to this, we had a very large tree that was removed in our backyard, and we live in a suburb, so we don't have a lot of land, meaning it's a typical suburb blueprint. And we had an original tree in our yard that was about 130 years old and 6 feet in circumference. It was actually one of the largest trees in this area. And the house behind us was a rental, and a construction company bought the house. And progress, everything, things change. But it was particularly devastating to us because they didn't take into account. They kept pushing the development into the tree roots, and they kept promising me that they weren't going to hurt the tree. And they ended up, we went away one weekend, we came home, and they shredded the roots all the way to the property line. And, at this point, it's against the law, but they did it. And so it's one of those things where it was easier to pay the fine for them to take it. And the net result was that it was pretty devastating. It was pretty devastating for me and actually the neighbor that lived next to the house. We actually lost 3 trees. And if you live in a city, the trees are in a way a lifeblood to nature, to what's natural. And more people are living here. And so it's more crowded. So they become even more important when there's one versus if you're in a forest out west. It's just a very different landscape here. And so I
Yeah.
found myself, in order to heal, I remember we were originally supposed to go out to Utah last summer. And I remember driving away from here and just feeling devastated, just so sad about the loss of this life that I think that for some people would seem strange. How could you cry over a tree? But that tree represented history from before the 1900s. I mean, it had been here since the
Yeah.
1800s. It was a pretty profound thing. And I found myself connecting. We got as far as West Virginia, and Robbie and I just both realized we need to stop here. And we just spent days connecting with the maple and oak trees that were at our campsite and hiking and realizing that the roots that were in the soil at our house were connected to the roots of Rock Creek Park, we live right off of Rock Creek Park, which were connected to the C&O Canal, which were connected to the Potomac, and were connected all the way out into Western Maryland, which became West Virginia, which became Ohio. And there was so much comfort in the connection to the ground and to the roots. So I suppose grounding is not just remembering, but it's also kind of a sense of connection. And, I guess for me, that's a driving force.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful.
Yeah, I think when we can become aware of these different things, so for me it's trees, but we lived 6 months in the Sonoran Desert, and I was really aware of the life of the cacti. Oh my gosh, it was just incredible, these creatures and the birds, and the habitat of the desert is so extremely different, but it's no less grounding and connecting. For some people, that's their vibe. That's what is for them. And then some of the people we know in the Arctic that live there full time, it's in their cells. So the trick is finding what is best for you and not judging that. It might be that you're uncomfortable leaving the city, but you can certainly connect with a plant. You can connect with sitting out on the porch with some friends and listening to some music. There are ways to do it that are best for you. When we get away from technology and noise, the emotional patterns that we have, the mental habits or the mental even patterns. And also for me, because I'm a PT, I'm a yoga teacher, I've studied movement for almost 30 years, we also learn patterns in which we move through life and we just move through the day. There's a level of insight that it affords us. And the reason why that's so important is because I find most people do not trust themselves. They don't have a sense that they can return home, that their heart is a safe place. And we need that, because otherwise our connections with others are based on something else. It's more performative. And when you can sink into some of that self-awareness, which is different than self-absorption, there's a realness to understanding what your patterns are, because then you can be informed to make a different decision. You can say, I'm doing that. Okay, well then, do I want to keep doing that? Maybe not. What can I do instead? And for a lot of people, they don't ever get to that, what can I do instead? It's fearful. It's sometimes challenging. When you're outdoors, often if you're on a trail and you get off the trail, you're going to have to say, what do I need to do? What's next? And you work with yourself, and it brings you back. You eventually find the trail again. You eventually make it back. You connect with others, and then that connection becomes refined and meaningful.
I think, what I'm learning from you and understanding from you is that when we're out in nature, we're able to see and feel and experience and sense what the world has for us and what it has and how it's all connected together. And then the interconnections of nature are inviting and a template for us to connect with each other. And when we get out there and when we experience nature, it tamps down our stress levels and begins to cycle out the toxins and the sort of toxic state of our minds as well. and then gives us that different perspective, that chance to ground and reconnect. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. Well, hey, have a great trip once again, and really appreciate you taking the time to come back in and chat some more. We would love to hear how your trip is, and are you working on a sequel to Go Outside now that you have 100 plus more stops that you've made?
Yeah. So Go Outside is still available on Amazon. It's the full title is Go Outside, Connect and Learn in the U.S. National Parks. And that's on Amazon. And I have another book coming out on mindfulness and nature. That's not the title, but it's around living outdoors and how coming back to ourselves can help us to heal. So, yeah, thank you.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Talk soon.
Okay, my friend. Thanks a lot.
Yep.